Eclipse has changed a lot over the years. Most recently, it has moved away from being a lighting-based ability to a tap-hold one. In the process, de-nerfed the Helminth version, leading many to wonder if Roar is just a superior choice now. Before you can decide on that though, you need to actually understand Eclipse, and there's a good chance you don't. I'm Nick Engineer, let's solve a practical problem. By the way, you should totally check out my Patreon for more behind the scenes and to support the channel in the process. Anyway, on with the video. Eclipse's competitor, Roar, is a very simple ability. It costs 75 energy, lasts for 30 seconds, and grants you and all your allies in range a damage increase. This damage increase comes in the form of faction damage, not that the game would tell you. As a result, it is additive to other faction damage buffs such as Bane mods, anti-faction Riven stats, and the MR30 relay blessing. Faction damage is notoriously powerful due to being applied twice multiplicatively when dealing status damage. The base increase is 50% when cast by Rhino, or 30% when cast by anyone else. Very simple stuff really. Eclipse is a little less simple. Its tap cast provides a damage reduction buff on yourself, giving you 75% damage reduction by default. On Mirage, this can be improved with strength, with 120% strength reaching the cap of 90% damage reduction. On all other Warframes, the cap is 75% damage reduction. Unlike Roar, it only costs 25 energy, lasts for 25 seconds, and will not buff your allies without an augment. Do be aware, this damage reduction only benefits health and shields, not overguard. The hold cast is far more interesting though. This grants you a damage increase, replacing the damage reduction buff if active. Unlike Roar, the damage increase isn't faction damage, it also isn't pure damage, it's a something else modifier. Those of you familiar with Eclipse might expect me to call it a purely multiplicative bonus, applied after all other modifiers. Unfortunately, that's not quite true. To explain, I need to walk you through the utter insanity that is Condition Overload, its younger cousins Galvanized Damage mods of Aptitude, Shot and Savvy, and their weird niece Secondary Shiver. There are also a number of weapons which carry a similar bonus, but let's just call this whole group CO for Condition Overload. All CO bonuses add together before being used in a damage equation. Attacks broadly come in three types: hit scan, projectile, and radial. Hit scan is something that hits instantly and directly when cast with no travel time. This includes bullets from the Bratton, swings with an Ikaana, and so on. Projectile is something that travels to the target over time before hitting. Not just visually, but an actual delay from shot fired to damage landing. This includes Fulmin Shotgun Blast and the Ferry Fire Pulses. Radial is your AoE explosion, casting damage in an indiscriminate zone to hit whatever might be in range. This includes things like the Kuvaton Core Explosion, Teta Envoy Explosion, and Glaive Heavy Attack. CO applies differently to various weapons, and usually it's based on those three types of damage. Usually. Projectiles usually use multiplicative CO. All your other bonuses and damages totaled up, then multiplied by 1 plus your CO bonuses. This makes for a large damage increase. Hitscan usually use additive CO, additive specifically to pure damage modifiers like Serration and Pressure Point. In effect, CO here ignores those bonuses and applies to the weapon damage as if Serration and similar didn't exist, giving you a lower boost. Radial usually doesn't use CO at all, it's absent. It just silently mocks you for thinking that a mod offering you extra damage would actually give you extra damage. All three of these I have to stress usually because variations exist just to mess with you even further. The reason I've just slammed the Titanic of this video into that iceberg of inconsistency is because it affects how Eclipse works. If you have multiplicative CO, it multiplies with Eclipse's bonus, which itself multiplies with pure damage like Pressure Point. Stack the three together and you can get some silly numbers. It's great. If you have absent CO, Eclipse still operates how you'd expect with the bonuses that do work. But if you have additive CO, that whole CO bonus also ignores Eclipse as if it were a pure damage bonus, even while Eclipse is multiplying with, not adding to, pure damage bonuses. For example, with a 165% pure damage mod like Prime Pressure Point, stacked with a 500% Eclipse bonus, your weapon will have increased from its base value to 1590% damage. Any amount of additive CO bonus at that point would then only add to that 1590%, making for a terribly low increase. Additive CO is the most commonly used mode across weapons, which effectively means that Eclipse has anti-synergy with status priming. The justifications for taking the time to make an enemy receive plus 320% damage, for example, start to fall away if you have a 1590% value to begin with. You could better spend that time and effort on some other bonus. This is even murkier when dealing with Subsumed Eclipse because it has such a reduced base value. At only a 30% base increase, even multiplying alongside pure damage mods, Additive CO can still scale to far greater effect when used in combination with a significant number of status procs. All while this ridiculous combination of things are happening, Raw just works. 30% base increase on Subsumed ability, boosting your direct damage once, your status damage twice, and buffing both abilities and allies where Eclipse typically would not. Even if we account for existing faction damage modifiers, Raw wins virtually every time with status effects and is still reliably helpful with direct damage. You never need to question if your weapon is using Additive CO or not. The two bonuses just work together. Now if you do have non-additive CO, and you're relying on direct damage, not status damage, and you already have a faction bonus applied from something else, then, and only then, does Eclipse win out in normal circumstances as a damage buff. This rules out almost every melee weapon, any build relying on hunter munitions or other force / effects, any build relying on heat inherit or electric spreading, or any hit scan gun where additive CO is desirable to you. Suffice to say, that's a small pool of options remaining. Raw should be your default option for damage increasing as a result of being both reliable and effective, at least if you're picking just between those two abilities. So when is Eclipse the correct answer? If you're running Mirage, do not swap out Eclipse for Raw. You can't have both on the same frame, and Mirage gets far too much from her own Eclipse to justify taking it out for anything other than a pure explosive Legerdemain build. If you know ahead of time that your ally is bringing a damage buff too, picking the opposite buff is better, as two casts of the same ability will not stack. If your ally has Eclipse, use Raw. If your ally is using Raw, bring Eclipse. This is true regardless of whether Total Eclipse is being used or not, even if one player is using Lunar Eclipse or the other is using Solar Eclipse. You cannot benefit from the same ability twice without a bug being involved. If energy is your concern, Eclipse uses 40% of the energy per second compared to Raw. If defense is your concern, Eclipse can provide a defensive buff to health and shields, but not to overguard. While Raw can reduce incoming damage through the piercing Raw augment, this will apply for a much shorter duration and only on nearby enemies at the time of casting. Then the last case in which you bring Eclipse is if it breaks its own rules. For reasons that I cannot adequately explain, thrown melee attacks get the benefit of Eclipse twice, multiplicatively. This is just like how Raw buffs status effects twice. This means that all thrown glaives, all glaive explosions, and all Exodia contagion projectiles use Eclipse twice for all their damage, whereas Raw only applies twice on their status, not the initial hits. CO, our consistently inconsistent damage buff, continues to be weird about thrown melees. It applies additively on direct hit with a thrown glaive, multiplicatively on direct hits with an Exodia contagion projectile, and is absent on the embed damage of contagion or the AoE damage of both. I'd suggest you try not to think about it too much. Finally, Eclipse also buffs some abilities which for reasons count as weapon damage. Breach Surge, Final Stand, even Spectral Screen qualifies, but they all get buffed by Raw too, making the point moot for most of them. There is one ability that double dips, sorta, and that is Nova's Antimatter Drop. Antimatter Drop's explosion is buffed by both Raw and Eclipse, but the damage it absorbs does not include faction buffs, while it does include the Eclipse buff. Antimatter Drop is capped on how much damage it can absorb, however, which limits the potential power compared to ordinary weapon scaling, but it is the one ability where Eclipse actually helps out. Broadly speaking, Raw is the better damage ability. Eclipse gives you some different options, but is still a headache-inducing ability when you start trying to think about the different ways it seemingly randomly interacts with the game. Don't forget, this is after the reworks. Eclipse used to be based on your lighting settings, used to lie on the UI about what bonus you were actually getting, relied on a lighting system that struggled to make sense, would snapshot under specific forms of invisibility, and even used to boost the speed at which you could scan enemies with the Synthesis and Codec scanners. At this point, I would genuinely not be surprised if a later patch makes Eclipse give you extra affinity or starts buffing status chance somehow. Stick with Raw, it works. I hope this video has been as informative as it has been weird to research. If you enjoy this channel and want to see more, then definitely check out Patreon to support all that I do. That's all from me for now, so as always, do more, cast raw, and fight well, Tenno.